Senator Claire McCaskill is now facing a primary opponent from the left. Now, McCaskill's been a target of progressives since, she is one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate. So, yeah, it makes sense. We're going to come for her, okay? Because she's not representing us, and she's not representing liberal progressive values. Now, for example, she during the primary, she talked about Bernie Sanders being a socialist, as if that's a bad thing, and calling out all of his proposals, which are incredibly popular with the American people, and are actually done in many other countries, pie in the sky and unrealistic. She was a gigantic Hillary Clinton booster, and would always go out on Morning Joe and MSNBC to go attack Bernie Sanders. Now, she also would attack Bernie Sanders in his policies during town halls. For example, there was one in April 2017 where she told her constituents that policies like free college tuition are just too expensive. Quote, "Free college tuition is a great goal, except it's really expensive. It's really expensive when we are struggling over how we're going to pay in terms of what we have right now for Medicare. We can't just start having the government pay for everything." When people talk about that, they point out countries where that happens, people are paying 70% of their income in taxes. Now, that right there, that's a bunch of conservative Republican talking points, and they're also not true. Let's take one of the highest taxed countries in the world, Denmark, okay? The average Dane pays about 45% of their income in taxes, not 70%. Now, you might think, oh my God, they almost take half of your income. Holy hell. But what do they get in return? Well, they end up getting free education, right? Paid for by taxes, universal health care, an extremely generous maternity leave package. They get about 52 weeks. They get things like free child care so that women can go back to work after they've, taken their maternity leave. They have all sorts of social programs. And so, they're actually incredibly happy. In fact, they're one of the happiest countries on earth. Now, the average person, like I said, does not pay 70%. That's where she's wrong. Only the very top gets actually close to paying that amount. And I do remind you, back in the 50s and 60s, our millionaires and billionaires here in America paid close to 90. So basically, like I said, she's using very conservative, very Republican talking points that sound a lot like Hillary Clinton. Remember, a single payer would never, ever happen. It's too expensive. It's pie in the sky. But the truth is, these policies actually save money by removing the profit motive and giving the government more leverage to be able to negotiate prices. However, Claire McCaskill, she's not interested in that. What she's interested in is winning elections and making sure she takes donor money. Now, there's a progressive challenger out there who actually might get in the way of that. Now, but first, just weeks before she went after Bernie's proposal, she pleaded for help from Bernie Sanders supporters. Now, this is rich. She said, "All of you who are Bernie supporters, I need you, I want to talk to you, I want you to be part of our effort." Okay. Hey, look, I'm one of the most open-minded Bernie Sanders supporters in the world. Okay, well, you could have came and asked me. I would have told you what we want is we want Medicare for all. We want a higher minimum wage. We want $15 an hour. There's a living wage to start with. And we want tuition-free higher education. We want to make sure that people who go to college don't have to go into debt in order to do so. That's pretty simple. That's what we want. Well, she says, absolutely not. She is against good policy. So naturally, progressives are going to be against her election campaign. Hey, it's nothing personal, Claire. You're not a bad person. You just don't represent us. You represent the donors. And that is the system that we're fighting against. Now, because of that, she knows that a challenge is coming. In fact, earlier this year, she complained about the prospect of facing a primary challenger when she said, "I may have a primary because there is, in our party now, some of the same kind of enthusiasm at the base that the Republican Party had with the Tea Party. We are seeing that same, and many of those people are very impatient with me because they don't think I'm pure." Well, look, Claire, it's got nothing to do with purity. It's got everything to do with whether or not you're representing the will of the American people. the people that elected you, the people that you're supposed to work for. That's all we care about, is whether or not you're representing those people. This isn't a purity test. It's a are you actually representing me kind of test. And from her stance on Medicare for all, it appears that she is not. And now her challenger is going to challenge her on that. Now, this is according to Mike Sonato, writing for Progressive Army. He writes, a progressive primary challenger has emerged to hold McCaskill accountable in the Democratic primary and represent progressives in the Missouri Senate race. In which, yes, there are progressives in Missouri. There are progressives everywhere. We are everywhere, and we're pissed. Now, the challenger is named Angelica Earl. Now, she is, and she's very interesting because she is actually going after specifically on the healthcare issue, and she has a lot of experience with that because she used to be a former verification specialist for the ACA. Now, in an interview with Sonato, Earl says, quote, I had to do expirations at one point. So this is explaining why she is now on board for Medicare for all. She said, my second expiration ever, this is where they cancel people's insurance. The second one I ever had to do, it was on a 3-year-old boy. That upset me to have to expire a 3-year-old child. They had to lose their insurance. So here I am sitting in front of this button. I had the person next to me who was helping me learn expiration saying, you have to hit the button. You have to expire them, but I couldn't do it. My supervisor then came over and said, you have to. So I ended up having to expire that person. I did 4 more expirations that day and walked away for about a week. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. There's no reason children should be getting expired. There's no reason people shouldn't have health care. So I'm saying from all those people I've talked to, the hundreds of people while working at the marketplace, single-payer healthcare is the way to go. And could you imagine having to push that button? Knowing that, hey, when I push this button, there's somebody on the other end, a 3-year-old child, that is no longer going to have health insurance. So anything that happens to that child, they will no longer be covered when it comes to health. That's horrible. That's awful. Especially when, look, you can be expired for almost anything, even improperly filled out paperwork. In fact, Earl says that she could be forced, or that she would be forced to expire health insurance for things like incomplete applications, to require documents from being not being submitted. Yet those same requirements were muddled and incoherent. So it was very difficult to, tell people like, hey, this is the stuff we require, and to have them actually be able to get all that information in because they didn't know themselves. Now, she also said, now a lot of people say the Affordable Care Act can be fixed. I can say from an inside knowledge of how disorganized, dysfunctional, and how completely irrational the working environment was, the ACA probably cannot be fixed. It was changing every day, multiple times a day. It never had a consistency. If you missed work for a week, you're coming back to a totally different playing field. It's a great thing that we had, but it's not a solution. The solution is seen in countries all over the world, but not here. And that system is one payer, one insurer, no premiums, no deductibles, copays, financed by progressive taxation, and in the case of Bernie Sanders, rolled out over a 4-year period, with people being able to transfer over to an expanded Medicare system like people who already do. Now, that's interesting because there's a lot of people that make the argument that, hey, man, if you do Medicare for all, it's going to completely disrupt the system. It's going to disrupt private insurance profits. But as far as regular people go, we have thousands of people that transfer over to Medicare already. Whenever somebody hits the requisite age, I believe it's 65, to go and apply for Medicare and enroll, they do. And then they're immediately transferred over. So you go from being on private insurance over to public insurance. We already do this. And with a long phase-in period for Bernie Sanders' bill for Medicare for all, it would go about the same. We already know how to transfer people over. So that talking point makes absolutely no sense. But as far as the system goes, We already know that a system like this will work because it works in other places, okay? And look, this is something that we desperately need to adopt. And that's when we need politicians that will actually stand up to the insurance companies and to the pharmaceutical industry and actually represent us, which unfortunately Claire McCaskill does not do. Now, one more thing here that Earl told Senato. She said, I will say Claire McCaskill seems like a very nice person. She, in my opinion, is not evil. However, she is very, very detached from what Missourians actually need. So I guess once you've been involved in and engulfed yourself in money for money for so long, and of course you have Citizens United, which just keeps pushing more money at you, I can see how it would become very easy to not realize what the people down at the bottom actually go through. And she's talking about, of course, the influence of money in politics from, again, large pharmaceutical companies and health insurers that will pay off our politicians. When you're getting all that money thrown at you, she says, yeah, it makes sense that you're going to lose perspective. And that's the problem with money in politics. Again, it's not the people that are in this system that are bad. I don't have anything personally against Claire McCaskill. I just think she's wrong. And I think her positions are more harmful than they are helpful. So, and this is what Angelica is saying. When you're in that system, when you're in that bubble surrounded by all of this corporate money and all of these, consultants that get paid and all these companies that are willing to give you money for your endorsement or for you to do something for them, you're going to lose that perspective. And that's why we have to change that system. Now, look, and right now, it's very, very difficult to be able to actually do that because right now we have a system in Congress that relies on that money, okay? Now, that's why we cannot rely on establishment politicians to actually fix that problem or any of our problems because they won't. That's why we need real progressives and an actual political revolution so that we can fundamentally transform our system away from one that serves the corporations and the wealthy into one that actually serves the people. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.